Hey everybody, so I just got home from seeing No Hard Feelings and in the theater, and I wanted to do a react video just very off the cuff to kind of give my thoughts. And it's interesting, this movie has been very controversial, mainly because of the premise where people have been saying that it gives off groomer vibes. Of course, when you see the actual movie, that is completely ridiculous, but the reason for that, and I've heard people on the left and the right complaining about the premise of this movie, and the idea is that there is this woman played by Jennifer Lawrence who is a barista by day and an Uber driver by night. Her car gets repossessed and she's at risk of losing her home because she owes back taxes to the IRS. So she accepts the offer of an affluent, late middle-aged couple whose son, whose nerdy, introverted son, is about to go off to Princeton. He's 19 years old, and they want him to be, wise in the ways of the world and sexually experienced before he goes off to college. And of course, obviously, they're ridiculously overbearing helicopter parents, and only ridiculously overbearing helicopter parents would come up with a crackpot scheme like this. But anyway, so she accepts. They're going to give her a used car if she successfully takes his cherry. So they they set this absurd scenario up, and people have been commenting on it, looking at the trailer, where Jennifer Lawrence at first tries to come on to him very, very hard because tries to just nail it as fast as, hit it and quit it as fast as she can because she's got to get the car. And of course, as you can imagine, through the course of the film, they develop a genuine relationship, a genuine connection, a genuine relationship, that sort of thing. And so people have been screaming, sounding the trumpet about groomer vibes from the trailer and everything, and that really, the very sexually aggressive stuff only actually takes up a small portion of towards the beginning of the movie. She realizes very quickly that that's not going to work, and she's going to have to appear more genuine rather than just trying to appear like some, trying to set up some kind of porno encounter with him, basically. And, there were some laughs along the way. I chuckled a few times. The normal people that surrounded me in the theater were laughing their asses off. So, maybe if you're a normal human being like me and not a normal human being and not some autistic weirdo like me, you'll actually enjoy this. But it really is just a standard sex comedy. I would not call it grooming. What she does, one, because he's not a child, and he doesn't really have any kind of diminished capacity. So I would just call it very ham-fisted attempts at seduction. But it's so interesting to me, the climate of there used to at least have been a time when moral outrage was at least based on what the thing actually was. We were at least willing to see it all the way through before we started being morally outraged about it. And it seemed like this movie, it's like, does nobody understand? Does nobody understand that it is possible to see a movie about people who do morally questionable, unethical things without advocating or being on the side of those morally questionable things? Do we not understand that anymore? There is a movie out there called Man Bites Dog, which is about a documentary film crew making a documentary about a serial killer, an active serial killer, as he goes about killing people. And that's the documentary they're making. It's a fascinating and a movie, very interesting, original idea. Are we just so deeply uptight that we can't, we have to just assume that we have to start spouting off about how horrible that is and how deeply repulsed we are with our refined sensibilities because we're somehow afraid that people will start thinking that we're in favor of this sort of thing or something? Do we not understand that conflict is necessary for an engaging narrative? Do we not get that? Anyway. So as I was watching it, though, I honestly, I had so many feelings, so many observations about it, so much more than what this movie deserves or what what it's aspiring to deserve. It's a very it's just a very lighthearted comedy of errors, really. And it's meant to appeal to that 18 to 24-year-old, late high school, early college age, sex crazed comedy demographic. There used to be movies like this used to litter the landscape of cinema. Everything from Animal House to Porky's to American Pie. Just you got one of these after another. One or two of these every summer over and over again, and ridiculous stories about geeky, nerdy guys trying to get laid, and there's some unattainable ideal woman that cavorts naked at some point. My favorite of these movies was called Private School. Not the comedy. There's no good comedy or anything in it at all. It's not a good movie, but there's just gorgeous, beautiful women in it. One of which is Phoebe Cates. So it's oh, and then Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I mean, you get the idea. There used to be tons of these. We don't get them anymore. And it's funny because there was this recent article about how Gen Z teenagers were shown American Pie, and they found it to be deeply problematic. And it's like, my God, we're not capable of it. We're not capable of understanding that things outside the realm of acceptable behavior do in fact occur in movies, and that the fact that they occur, the reason they occur is because the fallout from those unacceptable behaviors creates an interesting narrative to follow. Like, it's not because they're advocating for these things. And that's an interesting point to bring up, because the undercurrent of the humor here is the fact that the current generation of kids is so deeply uptight about these things. And it's so odd, because it would seem on the surface like we live in a time of tremendous sexual freedom, or very liberal, open attitudes about sex, and yet people seem to be getting more and more sexually repressed, paradoxically. And I could go on at length about why I think that is. I think I know this is a politically incorrect observation. The truth usually is politically incorrect, but it's I do think I actually just the other night watched the movie Bros, which I want to comment on as well. But I was watching that and I was thinking how, it's like all matters of sexual expression in the modern world have fully been relegated to the LGBTQIAAPS4 NCAA NAACP BMI, coalition over there. And it's like that those are the people that are supposed to cavort in a wild and sexually liberated environment, while the rest of us unenlightened heterosexual people are supposed to observe piously from the side, piously from the road as the parade floats go by. That seems, it weirdly, in our very politically correct culture, that seems to be the vibe that I get from the world now. And so going into it in such a world, a movie like this, which is really should not be considered problematic at all. It is very lighthearted Hollywood fluff, just good time entertainment. That's it. It's not, it should not garner that much controversy, and yet it does. But again, that is part of what it is poking fun at, and there is some smart satire about the fact that this current generation is so sexually repressed in such a bizarre way, to such a degree that it does seem bizarre and confusing to the older generation that I find myself a part of and everything. And Jennifer Lawrence's character is 32 in the film, and obviously Jennifer Lawrence is older too. But there's a scene, for example, that takes place at a kegger at somebody's house, and it's a like a high school college kegger at somebody's house, and Jennifer Lawrence is poking around trying to find Percy, is the guy that the kid that she's the name of the kid she's supposed to seduce, and she's trying to find him. She's worried what happened to him, that kind of thing. But as she's going through there, it's subverting all of the expectations as we go through. Like, she talks to a couple of guys and that seem to be hitting on her, and she tells them to go, basically to go fuck each other instead, and they get very haughty and take out their phones like, wait a minute, are you saying that the two of us having sex together would be a bad thing? And all of a sudden all these people are following her around, demanding to know, with phones taping her, demanding to know why she's so homophobic. And then of course it's revealed that this kegger is actually happening while the parents are home. And there'll be some spoilers on this along the way, by the way. But this kegger is happening while the parents are at home, so it's that much. It's really making the argument that the helicopter parenting is having a very deleterious effect on children's ability to grow up and thus pursue meaningful sexual relations and that sort of thing. And so it was interesting just watching this movie that felt like a relic of a bygone era. Was my reaction to it. And I've done a couple takes now, so I don't know if I probably already said this, but I chuckled maybe a handful of times, and everybody else was laughing uproariously. So normal people really enjoyed it. But as I thought about it, I was thinking, it reminded me of another movie. And I watched this one a couple of days ago in advance of seeing this film. It reminded me of another one of these teenage sex comedies that came out in the early 1980s. It's called My Tutor. And I was able to watch it again. It's actually posted on the Internet Archive if you want to see it. But it's called My Tutor. And it's so funny. It's funny how immature we seem now. It's like how childish everything has become now, because the teenage boy, I mean, he is an adult. There's none of that, but he's legally an adult but still a teenager. This young man, it's another film with a situation where you have a young man who is about to go, getting ready to go off to college at that stage in his life, and he ends up hooking up with his French tutor, in this case his French tutor, and spends the summer, with this beautiful, worldly, older woman, learning the ways of lovemaking and all of that. And it's interesting, in that movie, he has the personality, the character in that movie carries himself like what you would expect from like a 30-year-old man. And the woman, who is 29 in the film, carries herself with the gravitas and confidence and poise of like a woman, a much older woman. It's like her personality is the personality you would expect from like Judi Dench or something, like this much older, more mature woman, and that sort of thing. And nowadays, like, we have Jennifer Lawrence, the character that Jennifer Lawrence plays in this movie, at age 32, she seems like she's a maniacal 17-year-old, and this kid who plays a 19-year-old, the character, this 19-year-old, he seems like he's about 5. Like, just the expected level of maturity is just not there. And I know part of that, that's played up for laughs, obviously. His lack of his lack of personal development is part of a necessary part of his character. But it is still just so strange that you watch a movie like My Tutor, and everybody seems like they're 10 years older than they actually are. And you watch a movie like this now, and everybody seems like they're 10 years younger than they actually are. But anyway, getting to the point, so I watched I rewatched My Tutor, and I remember seeing it on the premium channels a few times back when I was a kid. So I rewatched this, and what was so interesting was, there was the ridiculous sex humor and all of this, but it was very much this idea of this woman that would be, we would think of as being up on the pedestal. She's this very angelic figure of perfection and everything. And the young man, becomes, essentially enters manhood as he is seduced by this woman and everything. And all of the sex comedy kind of happens outside of that, and they make this space for these two characters to have this very genuine, or at least kind of sincere relationship, even though it's a fling, a summer fling. It's a very sincere connection that they have, and that sort of thing. And the sincere connection goes in the direction of sex and goes towards that. And it's very explicit sex. The woman, I'm blanking on her name as I make this, the woman's absolutely beautiful, stunning beyond measure. And it's played like the sex is this really beautiful thing that you would aspire to, that you would want to have, and that sort of thing. I was curious, there's all these videos out there reviewing old movies and everything, and I love that a movie that came out the year before I was born is now considered old, but it is what it is. Anyway, this movie, I was looking for reviews of it. What are people saying about it now? And one of the reviews I found was done by this guy. He was jogging while he was doing the review, and I don't know what it is about people who think that doing something else while they're making it's like they think that doing something else while they're filming the video makes what they're saying more profound or something. Like, I don't know, it's the same thing where you see women that try to make these like really profound political observations and statements, or about matters of large-scale concern, while they're putting on makeup in a very afterthought sort of tone. I don't know why people do that. Why? I mean, are you really so uncertain about your own ideas that you can't just sit here in front of a camera and talk? You have to act like this is some sort of that you have to give the observation additional gravitas by acting like you're just casting it off over your shoulder while you're doing something else. Anyway, but the guy's running, and the camera is remarkably steady, and it's never exactly explained why. But he's out running, giving his review of this movie, My Tutor, as he goes, and his whole thing is just, this movie is just full of sex and nudity and just sex humor, and I'm so glad that I live in a time that is more enlightened and more culturally refined, where we don't do things like sit and pay money to see beautiful naked women. This sort of thing is just so beneath our more enlightened sensibilities some 40-odd years later, where we finally overcome the orgasm, except for the alphabet people that, praise be upon them. But anyway, so I watched that and I thought, that is so perfect as like just a sign of the times. Like, we don't understand why it would be worth people's time to go see a movie where beautiful people get naked and have sex. And I think that really, more so than the quote-unquote groomer vibe, I think that is really what's at the heart of the controversy about this. Not that we are, it's not that we're, it's not that we're, culturally enlightened or something. We're just incredibly uptight. And rather than confront the fact that we're all incredibly uptight now, and it might do us all some good to go get laid, rather than confront that, instead, we want to try to act like our uptightedness is actually cultural refinement, and we're so much better now. It's such more enlightened people. Beautiful naked women, huh? Oh, I wanted to say something else on that subject. Obviously, the other major draw for me to go want to see this movie is that It turns out Jennifer Lawrence gets stark raving naked in this movie. And it was so, I don't think, it's funny, I don't think I've ever had so many observations about a, like, 1 minute nude scene in a movie. But as is traditional with these absurd sex comedies, the beautiful, unattainable female ideal has to appear nude for a moment. They set that up in American Pie. They lampooned it in Not Another Teen Movie, where they just have a woman that's completely naked the entire movie, that sort of thing. But it was so interesting because what happens is, in the scene, she tries to get him skinny dipping with her. And, of course, she's doing all of the obvious stuff that any more sexually confident man would just naturally glom onto. But she tries to go skinny dipping, and he's just he's coming up with every reason not to. And it's funny, she takes off all of her clothes, and we don't see her nude as she's going on the beach. It's at night, and she's going on the beach to get in the water. We don't see her nude at that point. She's suddenly in the water, and we see her shoulders up, yelling at him to get in the water with her. So they get in the water. They're both naked. And then some drunk assholes come along and steal their clothes because they think it's funny. And it's like two guys and a girl. Jennifer Lawrence goes storming out of the water completely naked. And at this point now we are finally seeing naked J-Law. Which is funny because, again, naked J-Law was part of why I wanted to see this movie. I like J-Law. Naked J-Law is just, it's an upgrade. It's the, naked J-Law is the Tanuki suit of J-Law. And it's so funny because it's like, I don't feel any shame for saying that I want to see J-Law naked. But for some reason, that's supposed to be the idea that a man would want to see a woman naked is, again, beneath our delicate and refined sensibilities now. That's pervy and gross, and just the suggestion of it is rapey and groomer vibes and all of this crap. That's awful and sick and creepy, and especially, God, I'm almost 40. I'm going to be 40 very soon. A 40-year-old man, a middle-aged man expressing sexual desire? Heavens to Betsy, it's the most depraved, disgusting thing ever. Doesn't he realize that sex is only to be had by the alphabet soup cult now? Anyway. But J-Law goes storming out of the water, stark raving naked, and she goes and just starts beating the crap out of these people, like, does not hold back. It's kind of disturbing, though, because they start fighting back with her, and I wouldn't even call it fighting. They're not fighting back, I should clarify that. They began this altercation, and theft is theft of property is the initiation of physical force, so as far as I'm concerned, she's totally in the right to beat the living shit out of them. And so she beats the living shit out of them naked, stark naked, and the whole fight sequence is naked. And I'm like trying to process this thing because it's honestly like she gets hit. There's a thing where the guy's taking some of the clothes, he's wadded up the clothes and he's beating her over the head with it. And she's like this for a second. And, my natural impulse is, suddenly I want to go kill that guy. This is not erotic to me at all. This is not sexy at all. Then there's a woman, the woman in the trio, and I guess they had to put a woman in there to balance it out a little bit, but the woman actually straight up kicks her in the crotch. And it's done in such a way that we really feel we're meant to feel the impact of it and everything. And she ultimately emerges victorious, but I was just sitting there trying to process that, where it's like, okay, naked J-Law was obviously supposed to be a big payoff for this movie, but it's delivered in a way that could not be any less comfortable, could not be any less enjoyable. Again, that's always, whether it's Elizabeth Berkley, Shannon Elizabeth, who is not Elizabeth Berkley, Shannon Elizabeth was the one in American Pie, I think. Anyway, whether it's her in American Pie, or it's the shower scene in Porky's, or anything like that, there's always a payoff with the beautiful woman nude scene. And it's always, in these movies, it's always done in such a way that it would be every man's fantasy to have that happen in real life, to encounter that scenario in real life and that sort of thing. And even like in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where the famous Phoebe Cates scene is entirely a fantasy. But that's how it's set up. And it's so, in this, it is so awkward and so uncomfortable, and it's just, it was weird. It was like they were trying to give us naked J-Law, but in such a way that we wouldn't be able to enjoy the fact that it's naked J-Law. It's kind of like there's the famous scene in, I believe it's Varsity Blues, where the unattainable female ideal is finally ready to get naked, and she walks into the room wearing very carefully placed whipped cream and nothing else. That's the kind of naked J-Law that I think, that we're supposed to see in this movie. Something beautiful, something angelic, something satisfying, not this weird, deeply uncomfortable thing where a fully nude woman is being engaged in physical combat with two men that in reality would have been very easily able to overpower her. It's just a very odd, uncomfortable thing. And that was that scene emerged as one of my major criticisms of the movie. This movie aspires to be a ridiculous, dumb, fun adolescent sex comedy, and the message, the moral of the story is that the uptight Gen Z the uptight Gen Z kids that find everything problematic are really the victims of helicopter parenting, and they need to grow up and live a little. That's the message. But then it's afraid to give us, the audience, the very same payoff, the very same satisfaction that it's saying we all need to go out there and get. So, spoiler alert for anyone who cares, they ultimately don't end up actually having sex. They end up having a meaningful friendship. So they're both happy about being in the friend zone. Great. And that was, again, the thing was, it's like the movie defied its own message. The message of get out there and live a little. You need to get out there and live a little, and for God's sake, go get laid. That's the message of this movie, and it's the pervasive message of this movie. It's the point that they're trying to make throughout. But then we just end up at the end going the route of meaningful friendship. And they do try to fuck at one point. He comes early and never gets inside. And it was just it was depressing in a way, because I was just thinking, like, in reality, it's funny, it's like, I understand, I am not a person who wants to live in this kind of reality that I'm describing. I wish the world I want to live in is a world where people make a kind-hearted, meaningful connections with each other, and those kind-hearted, meaningful connections eventually develop into intimacy and sex and romance and all of that. That's the world I'd like to live in, but I don't think the human race is wired that way. The human race is, the human race is just barely evolved from the gorilla mindset that we came from before. And it's a lot less sensitive. The reality of the world of the human race is we're a lot less sensitive, a lot less kind-hearted than we should be. And in reality, in the blunt, hard nature of reality, I was thinking, in reality, what's going to happen is this kid, there is no way in hell this kid ever in the rest of his life ever has the opportunity to have sex with a woman as beautiful as J-Law, or this character played by J-Law. And he's going to look back, he's going to get to my age and look back with tremendous regret on this time in his life. And is honestly probably going to wish that his experience with her could have been a little less meaningful. And that's the thing, looking back at that movie I mentioned before, My Tutor, yeah, they actually develop an actual sexual relationship. And the whole thrust of this movie, no pun intended, the whole time has been you need sexuality. Your sex life and the development of your sex life is a crucial part of who you are, and you need to take the reins of it and actually do something about it. And that it never fully contradicts that message, but at the end still shoves this thing in of, oh, now they have a meaningful friendship. And I understand where it's going from a narrative standpoint. From what ultimately happens is he finds out that his parents have been have just had this woman on the take the whole time, and he gets incensed with them, no longer wants to have sex with her, is disgusted by the whole thing, all of that. And yes, I get that from a character development standpoint, but from the standpoint of a satisfying narrative arc, it's just not there. It's like the whole movie has been trying to say, hey, there is an important part of your life that needs to be realized by having sex. And rather than give us that payoff, rather than find a way to have them genuinely develop a genuine sexual relationship, which would have really made the movie satisfying, rather than that, we get, and the moral of the story was that friendship is what matters all along. I will say this, it's very odd, but they had a plot thread, and this made me think maybe this started out in the writer's room and they threw it out. But one of the backstory elements to the Jennifer Lawrence character is that she has this father, this very affluent, well-to-do father that she never knew, because her mother was just her father's girl on the side. And when her mother got pregnant, the father just threw him a bunch of money to go away, and so she never knew her father. And she tried writing a letter to him that she never got back, and that never got to him, and she's never had any contact with him. She doesn't know how to get a hold of him, yada yada yada, all of this stuff. The thing that could have made the whole meaningful friendship angle of it actually work was if that affluent, well-to-do father that ran out on her turned out to be the Matthew Broderick father that had hired her in the first place. And now this kid is actually her brother. Good. Now, from a narrative standpoint, we have taken the potential for them to have sex off the table, and having done that, now they can have the meaningful friendship. That would have worked from a narrative standpoint, something like that. But instead, they just kind of decide that a meaningful friendship is better. And no, I'm sorry. In that situation that they set up, kid, you need to have sex with the beautiful older woman. I mean, seriously, you're going to be kicking yourself looking back because J-Law threw herself at you and you didn't jump on that. So, and that's what's so, the difference between this and that movie I mentioned before, My Tutor, where the evolution of the character, the meaningful character development in the young man character comes about as a result of his sexual relationship with this woman, rather than sex being portrayed as this aberrant, chaotic force that is, like we get this dual message of do it and we're failing the young generation is failing themselves by not going out and getting laid, but at the same time, meaningful friendship is what matters. I mean, my God, it's almost like, okay, imagine how another great sex comedy, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, imagine how it would have felt if that movie ended without him getting laid. How unsatisfying that would be. Okay, well, this is the 19-year-old virgin, and it's still pretty unsatisfying. Yeah, he's going to end up rich. He's going to be able to, he's going to end up rich. He's going to end up getting together with somebody. Yeah, all of this, but you know, he had that opportunity to make the fantasy reality. The fantasy, and that's the thing. Using My Tutor, and this is also the most in-depth analysis the movie My Tutor has ever gotten. But again, that's one of the things is we lost in movies. We lost that desire to go live in the fantasy world. We lost the desire in the people. The My Tutor was made for people who want to go live in the fantasy world of having a beautiful older woman enrich you in the ways of human sexuality in this wonderful, beautiful environment. This movie is telling you that having that fantasy is asinine and stupid and to be laughed at and to be shat upon and all of that. And that is so, it's just, again, it's so indicative of the times that we're in. We are incapable of escaping into fantasy. We are incapable of enjoying ourselves. The only entertainment that we're able to applaud or indulge in is entertainment that, like this, kind of wraps us on the knuckles for wanting to escape into a fantasy world in the first place. So, anyway, those are my thoughts. Like I said, it's ultimately I would not have given it this much attention if it had not been for the totally unjustified controversy that preceded it. But anyway, if naked J-Law getting smacked around is what's interesting to you, and a totally a premise that is set up to be satisfying, that is never satisfying, enjoy it, have fun with it. I would like to see more movies like this. I would like to see a lot more screwball comedies and a lot less, what Martin Scorsese referred to as theme park rides, Marvel theme park ride type movies and everything. I would like to see more movies about people and about human beings and stuff like that, and about human relations. So it's good on that front. Maybe if it does well, we'll get more of that kind of thing back into the theater. Anyway, so they got my $17, and honestly, I hope the movie studio got some of my popcorn and drink money too, because that came to a fucking $16.95. I'm not kidding. They gave me so much popcorn I could not possibly have finished it. Anyway, what are your thoughts?